when you're someone that has many different interests, many different passions, it can be really, really frustrating to figure out how you're going to go ahead and pursue these different things. It can feel as though you're getting pulled in different directions. And, 1 minute you are pursuing one interest and you start to pursue that interest, but then another one pops out and you start to look at that one and you start to pursue a little bit of that one, but then you're realizing that over here, you haven't gone deeper on it. And there can be this real getting pulled, getting scattered across, and it can be overwhelming to the point where you start to, hear the whispers of people saying, hey, you just need to focus on one thing. And this isn't true. You don't need to focus on one thing. You can pursue more things than just simply one. And this took me a long time to figure out. For me personally, I wanted to pursue multiple different interests, and it was just a matter of figuring out how to organize those interests. And that's how I've been able to develop my own personal philosophy at a deep level. It's how I'm able to run a philosophy business. I study 12 subjects a week. I have different hobbies that I pursue. I have plenty of time off to just rest and spend time with loved ones and be in nature. And if I was to hear this back in the day when I was trying to figure this out, I would be like, that really? You're able to do that? And so I want to tell you about how I can approach it and how this works within the context of vocations, especially for people that are interested in deeper levels of mastery. And my name is Joel. I'm a philosopher. I'm absolutely obsessed with vocations, this idea that we all have a calling and how to navigate that calling in the world. And that's why I'm here on places like YouTube, Substack. I host a podcast called the Career Archetypes podcast. It's why I help people to choose the right career path with conviction in our online membership, and not living a life where you're properly aligned with your calling can lead to this resentment and regret. It's something that I never want people to experience. And then actually living a life where you're pursuing that calling leads to these higher states of like, wow, this is actually what I'm meant for. This is actually the type of life that I want to be leading in this world. And one of the things I noticed was a lot of people that I work with, they're more creatively inclined, they're spiritually inclined, and they typically have multiple different interests, as do I. And a lot of the issue is not that it's wrong to have multiple interests. Sometimes you can get shamed for having many different interests, but it's about organizing them in such a way that allows you to pursue multiple different things whilst not missing out on these levels of depth and these levels of joy that are outside of just pure pursuing your calling. And so the first thing that we have to think about is this question of, is it even possible? There's a real narrative of people talking, saying like, hey, pursuing one thing, not really that possible. Pursuing one thing is the only way to pursue something with depth, as opposed to, hey, you can pursue many different things. Now, it absolutely is possible to pursue many different things. I remember when I was working with a past colleague quite a while ago, and this was when I still was in a 9-to-5 job before I left. And she was telling me the story of someone that she knew, was a friend, who essentially had a very unique career path structure. And so for 6 months of the year, her friend would be working within website design. He'd be doing website design, and he ran like an agency. And for the other 6 months of the year, he would actually be doing tour guiding in different parts of Africa, and he would also be doing wildlife photography. And he was also super into golf, and he had plenty of time to do golfing, and he also had a family. And I remember just thinking, like, that's really, like, he can do that, and he's able to do these many different things at the same time. And I remember asking her, like, how's he doing this? And she said things like, well, the website industry is booming. She also said he was just lucky, he got there in the right time. And this was sort of the comments that were given to this kind of a path. And a lot of people would see this path as something that is sort of unattainable. This person just, lucked into it. And on the surface, I sort of heard that and thought like, okay, maybe he was just lucky. But underneath, I was like, no, something's going on here. Something's happening whereby he's able to pursue many different things within the context of his vocation. And it wasn't until later on when I started to really understand vocations and also understand how multiple interests could be organized that I was like, oh, okay, something is going on here, and it's about organizing multiple interests that actually allows for that. Now, it's really important. The first thing that I want to sort of mention as we go into this idea of how do you organize your interests is to understand sort of like the theory behind it And then at the end of this video, I'm going to go right into like the practical stuff, meaning like what does this actually look like, on the level of a calendar within a week. So when it comes to the theory, we have to understand that you have to build a discipline that is sustainable, that's long-term, that you really, really love, and that excites you. And so when you have multiple different interests, it means that you need variation within your path, and that has to be built into the path, meaning that you can pursue many different things at different levels of intensity, right to the level of mastery. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go ahead and check out another video that's called How Multi-Passionate People Can Approach Mastery Differently and Why They Need to. But when it comes to this idea of pursuing many different interests, there's really one main constraint that you have to be aware of in order to properly organize everything. And that constraint is time, right? So no matter how long you live for, you've always got this constraint of time. And so you can't do everything. You can't do infinite things, but you can do more than one thing. And you can do more than one thing at incredibly high levels. And so we're always looking at time. So if you were to live for 100 years or 200 years, you're still able to pursue many different things, but at some point it's going to end, right? At some point we are going to have to realize and face our mortality and move on. So we have to always think about this within the context of time. So even if we become hyper efficient with our interests, even if we look at it through like this asymmetric perspective where we're just putting in a little bit and we're getting a lot out, there's still going to be an endpoint. There's still going to be when it's over. So we have to always be aware that at some point, on some level, we have to prioritize things properly, which actually leads me to the most important thing that you need to understand in order to properly organize your interests. So the most important thing you need to understand is that you have to know what you want. If you don't know what you want, you can't organize your interests. And what I mean by this is you have to have a very, very clear aim as to where you want your life to go. What's the life trajectory? How is this going to unfold? And if you don't know that, then there's deeper layers of questions that you have to answer. And typically, if you were to think about this through an analogy, if you were to have like a map, then you have this sort of, okay, I'm aware of this scenery, but if you don't have a direction, you can't use the map. The map becomes quite useless. And so you have to have a direction. It's also like if you were to think about somebody that is kind of like lost in a city, if you were to go and ask like a local, like, hey, excuse me, I'm wanting to go and try to find a place. And the person will be like, okay, where are you trying to go? And I can help guide you. And you're like, well, I don't know where I'm trying to go. So you have to have a clear aim. Otherwise, you're just, wandering around lost. And to give you more context as to what this looks like, if you were to think about somebody that wants to go really, really deep and become like the best at their craft versus someone that wants to have lots of variety and fluidity in their path versus someone that wants to have like lots of pleasure, lots of hobbies within their path, organizing interests around that type of direction is going to be different for all three. And so you have to have a very clear understanding of where you want your life to go and what your overall aim is. And if you don't know what the answer is to that, that's okay. But what it means is one of two things. The first thing is you haven't spent enough time understanding yourself, or you don't have the right knowledge to figure out yourself properly yet. That's one of the reasons why I have this online membership, where the very first half of the membership is all about properly understanding who you are through specific lenses that shine light on areas that you're not even aware of. Different gifts, different traits, like your personality makeup, why you're being drawn to particular interests, why you're constantly getting stuck at particular stages as you go to make moves within your vocation, why you're constantly going through like recurring patterns and job hopping. All these different things really speak to not having a deep awareness of who you are. The other reason that people can get stuck and not have a clear aim, so they can't organize their multiple interests, is simply because they haven't spent enough time developing their life's direction. So they don't properly know the type of life that they want to lead. If you don't know the type of life you're going to lead, you can't properly organize your interests. And so if that's you, then I would definitely go ahead and check out our online membership, and I'll leave a link down below. Now, with that being said, if you do know and you are clear, then I have a really amazing model for you to use and apply to be able to properly organize your interests. So this model is called the depth, breadth, and joy model. And it's really, really simple. It has 3 different parts, and I'm going to explain each of these 3 parts. The first, I'm going to explain the theory of it, and then I'm going to explain exactly how to apply it so that you can properly organize your interests. And this model has allowed me to do really deep work, mastery level work. It's allowed me to study 12 different subjects per day, many different interests at a time. It's also allowed me to be able to pursue different hobbies and these sort of pleasures that I have without having to worry about, taking them to the next level or having to like earn an income from it or anything, and never feeling like any sort of guilt for it. So I want to break it down. So the first part of this model is this depth. And so the depth part really refers to this deep, obsessive, passionate interest that is at the core of your vocation. So this might be a subject, it might be a theme, it might be a craft, it might be a skill, but really it's this thing that is what you're absolutely passionate and made for in this world. It's what you're meant to be doing as a part of your calling. And so knowing what that is allows you to go to the depth of it, allows you to go to those levels of high mastery. And if you don't know what yours is, that simply means, like I mentioned, you have to go and tap into yourself and figure that out through multiple different layers of perspective. But for me, if you're wanting to know what mine is vocations. And so going to the depth of this, willing to devote my entire adult life to it within the context of my professional life, this is what mine is. If you were to look at someone else, you might have someone that's going to really devote their entire life to the craft of painting or devote their life to the craft of telling stories. There's so many different ones, but you'd have to know what yours is, and that's where you get that level of depth and that level of mastery. Now, as I'm saying all of this, and if you hear me talk about examples of myself, I want you to realize that this is within the context of my own personal life aims. And this can be worked in any way in relation to your own personal life aims. So moving on, the second part of this model is this breadth part. And that simply has to do with a wide array of various interests. And this is where I'm able to study many different topics. And all these topics that I study are connected to my main topic, but the connections aren't direct. So they're semi-related. So to give you an example of mine, some of them include like history, biography, the chakra system, astrology, Jungian psychology. There's so many different interests that I will study in a wide way. But then I'm not going to the depth of them. I'm not trying to become an astrologer. I'm not trying to become a biographer. They are a wide array that connect with my main vocation, but they're not built in such a way where I'm meant to go to the depth of them. I'm always like tapping them, seeing the interrelation of them. And what this allows for is it allows this sense of novelty and vitality to come in, and also the sense of like, I have desires to learn this stuff. And so it allows me to feed these parts without taking me off course or taking me away from what it is that I'm meant to be doing. The other interesting thing with this is that by looking at this stuff and looking at it in this way, is I typically will find out that I am able to progress further than other people within those subjects. And that's just because I gain like insights that they wouldn't have gained through the filter through which I'm looking at things through at the depth level. Now, this for other people might not be intellectual. This for other people might be more skills, right? So for example, a documentary filmmaker might be, and this is actually like a real example, a student that I worked with, he had many different wide array of interests, and he was learning Adobe Premiere. He was also learning like DaVinci Resolve because he was trying to understand which one was better. He was also learning Adobe Illustrator. He was also learning about different cameras and what the different cameras look like on screen and how that felt. He also was taking a course about how to relate to other people, because as a documentary filmmaker, you've got to talk to a lot of people. He was quite introverted, and so this was something that he was trying to work through in order to properly pursue his craft. And so there can be many different skills or different things that fall into this breadth part of this model, and you just need to know, once again, what your aims are in order to understand how these fit together. Now, finally, we have the joy part of the model. And the joy part of the model, this is hobbies, this is pleasures. These are things that don't quite relate to the main vocation, but they just bring you a sense of like, this is awesome, this is fun, this isn't for anything but me and just satisfying that side of myself. And that is really, really important. Now, depending on what your path is going to depend on how big an aspect this is in your life. But to give you an example of some of mine, I will go like thrifting every now and again. I will go and do some book collecting, art collecting. I am also into like watching different fashion stuff on people like bringing out new shows because I just enjoy watching new like fashion coming out. And so these things aren't really super related to my vocation. Sometimes a little bit gets in there. However, they're not super related. They're just for me. They're what I'm into. And so those are the three parts of this model. And so you can sort of see how they work. We have a deep part, we have a wide part, and then we have a part that's just like pure for you, for just joy. And so now I want to tell you about how to actually apply it in your life within the context of a week. So if we look at this depth part of the model, all we need to do is we need to say, okay, this is going to take up, for most people, because they want to pursue their vocation, pursue up the most of your time. So for me, I run a philosophy business. And so from 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., I'm doing this depth work. And I'll do that every single day, Monday to Friday. And even deeper than that is I'm not doing anything within the space of vocations. I typically just have one task that I'm doing and just hammering on that one task. So to give you an example of what this might look like, I have this course within our membership, and it helps people to choose the right career path with conviction, walking them through this process of unearthing their career archetype. And through that process, people will follow an online course, and I'm always updating it, I'm always iterating it, I'm always making it better. We're doing this for years and years and years. And so it can take a long period of time to do this. And so every time I update the course, I'll go, okay, all I'm doing for this can be like for 6 months, from Monday to Friday, from 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. It's just course. Monday, 8:30 a.m., 12:30 p.m. course. Tuesday, 8:30 a.m., 12:30 p.m. course. Wednesday course, Thursday course, Friday course. And that's all I'll do, just course. And I'll do that for like 6 months until it's done, up to standard. And that's where I'm getting this deeper level of work. You know, I might find that I have to like research this particular thing at a really, really deep level and just like sit with it, think about it, and really go to the bottom of the depths with this. Now that's when it comes to depth work. Now for some other people, it might, like if you were to think about a writer, they might only be doing work on their, nonfiction book. If you were to think about a painter, they're only doing painting work within that period of time, and that's how they're developing that level of mastery. And so that's depth work, and you'll just want to figure out for yourself where this fits in. Now, I am aware that not everybody has the time within their day to be able to do this, and to tell you about how I approached it when I was working a 9 to 5 job back in the day. This was over half a decade ago. Now, I wouldn't recommend how I did it back then, but I'll tell you how I did it. So I would wake up at 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. and just work on one thing. And at the time, it was simply working on personality. So I knew that I wanted to understand personality. So from 4 a.m. to 8 p.m., from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., I would just be working on personality. Personality Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's all I was doing until I felt as though I understood it. And for you, like I said, I wouldn't recommend the 4 a.m., 8 a.m. type wake up, but you'll want to be figuring out where can you do depth work? Where does that fit in your life in the way that it's currently structured? Now, the second part of this model is the width part. And when it comes to the width part, the way that I'm able to study 12 subjects per week is actually really, really simple. Every single day, I have 1 hour per day dedicated to width. And I have this 1 hour, it's within that 1 hour, I study 2 subjects. And those 2 subjects that I study are rotated throughout the week. So I'll go ahead and run Pomodoro. If you don't know what Pomodoro is, it's just this timing technique to help with like productivity. And I'll just spend 25 minutes on one subject, I'll have a rest for 5 minutes, then 25 minutes on another subject, and then I'll have rest for 5 minutes, and then I'm done. And I'll typically do this at the end of the day, after dinner, and I'll do the next day, Tuesday, same thing, different subjects. 25 minutes, break for 5 minutes, 25 minutes, break for 5 minutes, and do the same thing on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday. And then I'll do nothing on Sunday. And so that is how I'm able to study 12 subjects. Now, you might be hearing that and thinking, well, you can't go really deep on that. And you're right, I can't go really deep on that. But I can go incredibly wide. I can nurture all these different parts of myself. And to give you an example, like tonight, I'm going to be studying Michel Foucault's Madness and Civilizations, or Civilizations and Madness. And it's just him talking through the lens of French philosophy about subjugation and about how there's these different forces that happen externally that turn us into like what is human. So that's very interesting to me because it relates to vocations. And then in the next block, I'm really looking at different ways in which literature is approaching vocation. And so I'm currently reading a novel, and that novel that I'm reading for this block is Ling Ma's Severance. And she kind of expresses the way that work is being done. It's kind of a modern novel, and it kind of prophesizes a little bit about the impending like health crisis that came after it. But like I said, it's related to vocations, but I'm not trying to be someone that's an expert in literature. I'm not trying to be someone that's an expert in Foucault or French philosophy, but I do have this real inclination towards making sure that I nurture this side and understand that side. For you, you'll want to understand what you want to do within this period. Like, this doesn't have to also just be abstract, conceptual, study type topics. It just happens that my path is like that. You know, if you are someone that is more like craft-based or skills-based, you know, for example, if your main depth work is around, you know, working with wood, maybe you're also looking at working with metal, or maybe you're looking at knitting, right? Knitting, and you're not trying to become the best with metalwork, and you're not trying to become like amazing with the things that you knit, but you understand that there are certain skills within those different subjects that can help be applied to the main skill. Even like intangible skills like persistence and patience and attention to detail. There are all these different components that can be applied as well to your vocation if that's the way that you want to go ahead and pursue it. So it's not just, hey, intellectual abstract ideas, but it's also this other side of, hey, there's real tangible skills that you can do and you can rotate. The other thing as well that I want to mention is that you don't have to do so many, right? I do 12, you might do like 3. Depends on what you want to do. You might do more, right? Depends on how much time you have and how you want to structure things. But it's about understanding what you want, what your aim is, and then organizing it in that style. Now, the final part is joy. And so obviously I do have hobbies. I pursue these hobbies on Saturday. I have the entire Saturday like off, apart from making sure that I study for that 1 hour, as well as I typically will jump into our online membership and community and just like see what's up with everybody, answer some questions, that kind of thing. And I really use that time to pursue these different hobbies and pleasures that I have within my life. And I'm never really trying to plan it that thoroughly. It can be quite spontaneous. I might plan it like the night before, but it's more just like, hey, I want to go and do this particular thing, rather than trying to like map it all out. And so you want to listen to that and obviously look at that and how that applies to your own life. And you want to start to say like, okay, where does depth work fit in? Where does this breadth work fit in? And where does this joy element fit in? And how much do I want of these things? And by doing that, you can get 3 things. You can pursue things at a level of mastery. You can pursue things widely and get to taste and try many different things without missing out on the progress of something deep. And you can also just enjoy something for the sake of enjoying something, for the sake of being alive, for the sake of being human, without having to make it or force it into, a pursuit or a career or something like that. And so you want to just remember this as you go ahead and create your own and figure out how that applies to you. And if you do it, then once again, you can have a path that you absolutely love, that's sustainable, that's exciting, right? Every single day, I get to study something anew, something fresh. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, what am I going to learn today? Having that within your path is super refreshing and exciting and keeps everything moving, because the deep work can be like really, really strenuous. It can be, because of this level of devotion, it can be hard at times. You like power through things, but not the breadth work. The breadth work can be continually exciting. You're like, oh, okay, this is moving forward. Now, the other thing as well is you want to allow it, as you're designing it, to grow and evolve with you. So as you start to learn more about yourself, you can be like, oh, okay, actually, I do really want to pursue a higher level of mastery. I'm going to add in more of those blocks. I'm going to make more time for that in my life because I do really want that. And so as you grow and as you evolve and as you really tune more into your own personal desires and your own personal way of being in the world, you can always change it and map it. But the fundamentals are that there needs to be depth, there needs to be width, and there needs to be joy. Having all three is really, really important because it allows for that sense of sustainability long term, rather than just saying, oh, I only want to focus on one thing and just like nothing else. And then there's these other like parts of you that are like, please feed me, please give me some life. So you can absolutely pursue many different things. It's not a myth, it's not a lie. You just have to organize them in such a way and be very, very clear on what your life aim is and where you want to go. And if you want to learn more about that, if you want to learn more about how to better understand these different interests that you have, these different things that you're being drawn to, and how this all works in the context of your vocation and your path and which career to choose, then I would encourage you to check out our online membership, where I walk people through step by step through this process of coming to an awareness of what they're meant to be doing in this life. And the way that I do this is I walk people through this unearthing process. We look at you as an individual through many different lenses: astrology, Jungian psychology, feedback loops, and observation, these psychological barriers that can hinder us figuring out what your one is. We look at you and your interests and your past, present, and where you're actually going. And this information is then come into this place of cohesion where it shows you what you're meant for. And I walk people through this process as to how to come into contact with their one career archetype. And then we go ahead and we map out the path, we walk out the basic steps, like what's step one, what's step two in the process, to make sure that you can actually get moving and start living a life that you love within your vocation. So if you're interested in that, I'll leave a link beneath this video.